At this point, I would like to introduce this afternoon's keynote speaker, Bob Blake. Bob is the owner of Solar Bear, pronounced Dizis Omakwa in Ojibwe. He's a solar developer located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Bob is also the executive director of Native Son Community Power Development, a nonprofit located in Minneapolis. Bob is a tribal citizen of the Red Lake Nation. His passion is spreading the word about renewable energy through communication, cooperation, and collaboration. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bob Blake.
Anin Boozhoo, everyone. My name is Robert Blake. I am a tribal citizen of the Red Lake Nation. I am also owner of Solar Bear and executive director of Native Son Community Power Development, a nonprofit located in Minneapolis. And I am also the Red Lake Energy Coordinator. And I think I last counted, I think I'm serving on like 16 boards across the country, both locally and nationally. And I just want to point out real quick, I got some folks here that know my family, and it was really nice to hear from those kind words just now. And so thank you for coming and listening to hear me talk about renewable energy and what I see as the future of that and the opportunities, not only here in Wisconsin, but I believe also for the country and also for the planet. So, yeah, let me just first talk about. It was 50. I think on my temperature reading yesterday, it was 54 degrees in the Twin Cities. I don't know, man. I've never, at least as long as that I've been alive, I don't remember ever seeing it 54 degrees in St. Paul, Minnesota. You know, usually we're like 20 below right now or something, 10 below right now, at least that. But I don't know if that to me. If people are concerned about that, I don't know. But I am. I was thinking about. I was watching the folks down at the border, and the migrant situation that is happening down in Texas, and I started to think about all those families that can't grow food because Central America is turning into a desert. I started and then I was watching this. I'm watching my nightly news thing in the Middle East, and you look at all those folks that are going into Europe, and we know this is climate change. We know that that the planet is heating up. We know that the Arctic is melting at a very high rate, right? And so, I mean, with all this happening, and we know that there's a direct connection to greenhouse gases, right? We know that that's the direct result of all that. But I think what we're not doing is we're not like educating more of the public. I just delivered $1 million of electric vehicles to the Red Lake Nation last week. And I have the community yelling at me, getting mad at me for delivering electric vehicle. Free, everyone, free electric vehicles to the community. And they're chastising me. They're yelling at me. And I'm thinking to myself, where's the disconnect here? Boy, man, when I start seeing Native people get mad about protecting the environment, I'm like, oh my, I should throw up my hands. You know what I mean? But that just happened, and it really made me start really thinking about like where's the rest of that happening at, right? And one thing I do know about this country is we like to measure our success, maybe for good or for bad, how well we do economically, right? And what I do know is that renewable energy and solar is the cheapest energy that we will ever. I mean, okay, someone's out there is gonna talk to me about nuclear. I know that, but I know that solar and renewable energy, I mean, is what was it? I think $100 a watt, maybe in the 90s or something. It was like $100 a watt or something. Now it's down to like, I mean, people are writing contracts now for like, I know I'm negotiating a contract for 7 cents kilowatt an hour, I mean, it's ridiculous how far that has come down, right? And we know that manufacturing, we know that businesses, right, runs on cheap energy. We know that world leadership runs on cheap energy, okay? That is the one thing that the United States always had over everybody else, is that we had cheap energy. That was our ace in the hole. That was why we ran things around this world. Well, you know what, people? We're falling behind, And when I look at what Germany is doing, when I look at what China, how much PV they're putting up, when I look at all the other countries, and they know that if they have cheap energy, they're going to exert dominance, and that rolls me into democracy, and why now it's so important that we as a country, I think, get behind renewable energy, because that in itself will then uplift democracy. And I do a lot of these talks around the country, and I do a lot of these talks, and I talk about how tribal nations, all 574 tribal nations, can really be that Trojan horse, be that leverage that, for lack of a better word, force the fossil fuel, investor-owned utilities, and to start integrating with the small players and bringing them on board and working together and distributing those resources into communities, and including finances. So that's where I really see these opportunities really happening at, and I'm seeing them in my own backyard. I'm being a part of them. The more and more that I get involved with electric vehicles, I'm really starting to see, and I'm being educated by engineers. I'm not an electric vehicle expert, everyone, but the more and more I talk to these engineers, and the more and more I talk to these folks at Ford and all these other places, and let me just back up real quick. My nonprofit, we put together a grant to put together an electric vehicle charging network across the Midwest called the Intertribal Electric Vehicle Charging Network. And we're connecting Minnesota to North Dakota to South Dakota, into Wisconsin, into Michigan, and we're going to extend out to Montana and out to the West Coast next. But in doing so, I'm just learning so much about how these vehicles and the data that they're collecting, and the connection to the data centers, and the way that our transportation system is going to be working, where we are going to have trucks that are smart trucks that are going to be delivering goods and services, to our communities through this new technology. And it just baffles my mind, everyone, that this is where this is going. And I really do believe that if we here in the United States, in Wisconsin, Minnesota, wherever you're at, if we're not being a part of this action, we are going to be left behind. And one of the other things that, I do, and, I've been on the Governor's Workforce Development Board in Minnesota, do a lot of workforce development. And one of the things that that I'm starting to see is, if you're not, as a community, investing in workforce development, you're going to be left behind. Your community is going to be left behind because you're going to have to learn and relearn and learn and relearn. And I think as a state here in Wisconsin, as a community, and your communities, really focus in on this because, this is good, and this is going to be one of the big fights. And over in the state of Minnesota, we've got 5 jobs for every one person looking for a job. We realize in the Governor's Workforce Development Board that we underestimated what COVID did. We knew the gray tsunami was coming, right? We knew that there was going to be tons of retirees, right? We knew that was going to be happening. We knew that there was going to be all these folks that, let's be honest, our high school graduation rate was going to be decreasing. And the number of folks that were going to be retiring were only going to be increasing. So you were going to have this gap. And so we knew this, and we thought we planned for it, but what we didn't plan for is COVID. And that's the problem that we're having over there in Minnesota right now is we don't have the people to fulfill the different jobs that we need. And so, it just made me think about okay, how do we focus in on online training? How do we get people and meet them where they're at? And what we saw through the Coursera training that we were doing during COVID, we saw so many people that were focused on renewables and business. Now, I don't know if you guys are seeing that same thing over here in Wisconsin, but we saw that in Minnesota, and we knew for a fact that those are the things that we were probably going to start focusing on. So now we're really kind of keying in on that. Because, this is kind of what people want to do. And so my organization is running a pilot training program that is strictly focused on online training. And this is a pathway into building the state of Minnesota's biggest solar project, which is the Sherco power plant with Xcel Energy. And I'm watching these folks go through this program that we have at Native Son, and it's really interesting because they're getting their hands around this, they're getting their heads around this, and another thing that we've been looking at too is virtual reality, and there's a group down in California that are doing virtual reality training. So it's like when you put them out there into the field, it's all up here in their head, right? And then that's when they go through the practical piece, right? But they have it memorized, you know what I mean? And so, these kinds of things, I don't, and I'm assuming maybe there's a group out here that's doing this too, but I just find all that so fascinating that that's really going to be, the way that, we are going to be doing workforce development in the future. And like I said, if you're not in on this, I really feel like you're going to be left behind because it's moving so fast, and the technology is getting, Moore's law, right? Where they say like every couple of years or something, it gets efficient. I feel like Moore's law is being put on steroids right now because everything that I knew yesterday about renewable energy and solar is old today. And that's really the truth. And I think a lot of you in this room that work in the industry can say to me, can agree with that. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing on the workforce development side. And then, like I said, on the electric vehicle side, as I'm talking to these engineers, they're really talking about how these networks are all going to be talking together with these data centers. Data centers require a lot of power. My buddy is doing the work for the Google Center going to be happening down in Red Wing, Minnesota. They're putting a big Google data center down there. I don't know, is it Microsoft? I forget. Anyways, don't quote me on that. It's one of those two companies. But they're talking about how that is going to be focused in on like all this like smart cars and everyone talking to each other, and for the semis to be rolling and for those efficiencies to be really cut in half with artificial intelligence. And it just boggles my mind to be on these calls with all these folks and hearing about all this new stuff. Another thing that I'm starting to see too, everyone, is I've been on calls with the Department of Energy and how they want to reach out more to high schools. I don't know if you guys have seen this in Wisconsin, but what we saw in Minnesota was we're losing a lot of our youth at 16, and they're not resurfacing until 24. So that 8-year gap, that's a problem, people. So, we need to start planting those seeds early with our kids, so that they can have a clear pathway, I believe, into something that is really going to affect their life in the future, obviously, which is climate change. So that's another thing that I think that I'm super passionate about. And when the DOE folks called me up on this and said, hey, Bob, can we get on a call? As a matter of fact, I have that call tomorrow, as a matter of fact. But I'm really interested to see where that goes, because I really do believe that if we don't give our kids the necessary tools to deal with climate change, that they're just going to put their head in the sand, and they're going to do things that are not very healthy for themselves, and drugs, alcohol, whatever may have you. But I feel like if you give them the tools, then they're going to sit there and say, hey, we can handle this thing straight on. So when I saw that, that was at 16. And then we have a law in the state of Minnesota, everyone, that says that you as a individual cannot start receiving hours towards your certifications or towards your, so we switched that from 16 to 17. I'm going to try and work on getting that back down to 16 now. But that was something that really was put in place for farmers, so kids could work on the farm. And because through the years, lawmakers decided, hey, we don't want kids working, or whatever the situation is, they pushed it up to 17. I don't know if you guys have that same thing on the books over here, but I would encourage you, some policy person over here, to really look into that, because I think that's going to be a big part of trying to make sure that our kids are able to go ahead and get into this industry and fill those spots that we're having problems meeting. And we're going to see it here in our industry, in the renewable energy industry. So, but that now leads me into policy. I was a part of the group that, we passed 100% clean energy in the state of Minnesota. That was 5 years ago. I remember sitting watching these guys talk at Pillsbury Theater on Chicago Avenue, and I remember thinking to myself, all these guys are crazy. They ain't gonna pass 100% clean energy in the state of Minnesota. Hey man, we did it, and in that process, I was looking and I thought to myself, what if we created a tribal utilities commission? Incidentally, when I wrote that paper, this is back when I was in my grad school, going for my master's degree, the person that graded that is actually now the Public Utilities Commissioner over in the state of Minnesota, so Katie Sieben, and she was the one that told me, hey, you should follow through on this. Everyone, 5 years ago, I thought about this. Now, we don't have utilities on tribes in the state of Minnesota, but what I did do was I created a tribal energy advisory board. So that is like the crumbs for a tribal utilities commission. It's state funded. It's got like 1.5 million to fund that department. But I'm very proud of that, and I passed that, and I hope to get that passed this last legislation. And for those in here that are with different tribes or whatnot, I think that this is really important, or a lawmaker in here, because tribes really do need to have a seat at the table, especially with the Public Utilities Commission, especially when you got power lines and you got things going through their territory, and it will just make it easier. Give you a quick example real quick. We had a power line that was coming from Alberta, Canada into Duluth, Minnesota with Minnesota Power. They called us up and said, hey, can we run this power line through your territory? The guys in Red Lake called me up and said, Bob, what do we do here? And I said, yeah. I said, go ahead, but ask them, can I hook up power to that thing? They said, absolutely. They never thought that this was going to be coming to fruition, but now, we're going to be hooking up a lot of megawatts onto that power line, Red Lake is. But my point being in that is that saved the ratepayers in Minnesota Power's district, millions of dollars, right? And so it's that kind of collaboration between tribes and the utilities that are going to be happening. So having a tribal energy advisory board to help kind of negotiate that or mainstream that, I think will be a really good thing, especially for Wisconsin. We're doing it in Minnesota, and I hope to get that into all the rest of the 48 states, 49 states. So, that's a good policy measure, I believe, that we're doing in the state. And another thing, as we're talking about solar now, I want to talk about solar now. We're in Red Lake, where I'm from. We created a virtual tribal utility authority with the help of Baker Tilly. I don't know if anybody's in here from Baker Tilly. Baker Tilly, you guys, you helped me with this. But we're doing that in Red Lake, and so we're not buying the lines, but because there's all these rules with FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, about distribution and generation, we're just generating. Which are less rules. We created this in Red Lake, and we're really excited about seeing how this works and how it works with the local co-op, and seeing how we can work together, because we realize that we want to become our own co-op, but we know that that's going to take about 7 years probably. You got to get electricians, you got to get linemen trained up. So there's a lot to do there, but point being here is that that's a really exciting opportunity that we're doing. And one of the things that came out of that was the study that we did for a virtual power purchase agreement, a VPPA. And I think that tribes and other folks can probably use this model too. And it's just a framework, and you could go on the Minnesota Department of Transportation website and you can see the study. You can download the study. You can see how that's all put together, and it's a framework for a community to sell power to an entity. But I love this because, instinctively, that's going to put less pressure off the grid, right? We need to make all these transmission upgrades. We need to do all this work, but if we could put these little VPPAs around, that will take the less strain on our grid, and I think that's a really quick way to move to decarbonize the system a lot quicker too. So really proud of that. That took 2 years. This agreement that we would have with the Minnesota Department of Transportation, this will be the first virtual power purchase agreement in the country between a tribal nation and a state agency. So I'm super excited about that. And like I said, you could use this framework, and I've told this to other communities too, you can use this framework to put together a project and say you wanted to sell power to Hewlett-Packard, right? You could do that. You just would have to have Hewlett-Packard agree to it, right? So, and then of course, there's a lot of, these contracts are very difficult. So I would tell you all, get a good lawyer. I got a K Street lawyer to help me with that. So I've always said, you don't bring a knife to a gunfight, But I mean, I would very cautiously tell you to look into that, and those are some good things that are really happening, I think, in the state that could be applicable to Wisconsin in all the things that all of you are trying to do. So, talked about electric vehicles, talked about workforce development. I've talked about solar and the stuff that we're in, and utilities, creation of utilities. I am working with a national organization to really push FERC on the transmission and the interconnection queue. Boy, that's a whole other thing. That's a whole other monster, everyone. But, trying to explain to them that, sometimes a lot of folks don't have money to constantly, and Chairman Phillips, to Chairman Phillips is defense, and as I was plugging my ideas at him, there's, for the little guy, we don't have all the money like the utilities do to constantly to keep ourselves in the queue. And so I'm asking for some, I'm asking for some reasonable, allowances for, small communities to be able to put their project on the queue, to be able to make sure that it stays in the queue, and it get interconnected. So those are some of the things that, I get to try to advocate for and work on. So that's quite a bit. One of the last things I want to talk about real quick, and I want to jump back into workforce development, was I worked with the Midwest Renewable Energy Association. This is when I first started. It was like 5 or 6 years ago. Now, I can't believe it's been that long, but we did a training up at Willow River Correctional Facility and training inmates on how to do solar installations. The idea there was to fight mass incarceration with climate change, fight climate change and mass incarceration. That first 15 people that got trained, there was, I think, 120 inmates that applied for that. Or it was like something crazy like that. And, I still, a couple of those guys still talk to me, and they're traveling around the country working on solar. And one of them's got their kid, one of them's got, he's married, anyways. But it just makes me really proud that, those are some of the things that I believe that renewable energy can do, is change people's lives and give them purpose. And everyone, I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it in my own community in Red Lake and on the reservation, where one of the guys came up to me and said, "Bob, this feels really good. This really gave me purpose. It's helping our community. It's helping the environment. I want to do more of this." And so, you can't tell me that the stuff doesn't work. And I will get criticized, like I told you when I started this conversation here. I will get criticized for the stuff that I'm doing because people aren't educated. They don't understand it. But but you can't tell me that. You can't make me see that it's not worth doing, because I really do believe in this work, and I'm just very, very passionate about renewable energy. And I'm glad to see all of you at this conference, because all of you give me substance to keep moving forward. And I just want to tell all of you, thank you for listening to me and hearing me talk and hearing my story. And miigwech. And I could do some Q&A too, incidentally. 3:00, right? And real quickly, I was 30 minutes that I was told to talk, and then 15 minutes for Q&A.
Right on cue.
Right
on cue. We're going to open up the floor for questions, but I actually, since I have the mic, I get the first question. And Bob, I want to know, Wisconsin has a rich history around manufacturing, and I feel like with this renewable energy transition that is underway, that it would be remiss of Wisconsin to not be able to take advantage of that. Can you talk about maybe how we can do that as a state, kind of like, pick up that fumble, if you will, of manufacturing and kind of run with it?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't talk about that, and I should have said something about that. And I'm sorry, Tim, I didn't speak about, what we have going here in Wisconsin. So what happened was, I and a group of folks out of California, we put together an application to the Department of Energy to recycle electric vehicle batteries. So to take these batteries and use them as storage systems on homes, businesses, what have you. We had to jump through I don't even know how many hoops we had to jump through. But we were out at the RE Plus conference in Las Vegas. We were up on the thingy there, and we won. So we were awarded a $30 million grant to do the research on this project, and we're going to be doing some of this project up in Red Lake, and that particular deal, what we're trying to do there is basically show how we can start manufacturing this right here in the Midwest. And so I'm the Midwest partner to all this, and we've been talking to folks here in Wisconsin in a community, Justice 40 community, to bring that opportunity here and to remanufacture these batteries. And so I think that's one example, right? Now, these competitions and these grants, and they're constantly coming out from the DOE. So I would strongly suggest to all of you to get on that email list so you can go ahead and you could see how it's filtering out. I talk a lot to the folks at NREL. As a matter of fact, they fly me out there like 2-3 times a year now. But like, they told me that they have more of this stuff coming. And I always say this, man, the United States military started doing their microgrids on their bases and start preparing them, and I started to myself, hey, if the U.S. Army's doing it, then we better start doing that for our communities. You know what I mean? We better start making them resilient. We better start making them ready for climate change, because if the Army's doing it, we should be doing it. And so that's just some of the things, guys, that I'm seeing, right? And those opportunities are there for all of you to check out and be a part of. But I really do believe that we can do this work here. Here's a little secret, right, on the battery thing. It's covered 100% by the Inflation Reduction Act. You're right. I want to compete with Tesla Powerwall. That's where I'm going with this. And so I've got my partners here in Wisconsin, and we're working on it. But I think there's plenty of more opportunities. And guys, here's another thing too I want to say too real quick. We're helping with Haline Solar Factory is up in Duluth. They're going to be building a new solar factory in the Twin Cities. And so Native Sun is their partner around workforce development. And so we're going to be, I'm excited to learn this because I want to see how they manufacture these things. So we're going to be training folks into doing that workforce development piece to the manufacturing with them. And so that's something that's going to be coming up, but that's really exciting. And so I see those, those are just a couple of opportunities that just fell in my lap, literally. And so if they're falling in Bob Blake's lap, I know that they can fall in all of your laps too. And remember, you don't need to make the the panel itself. There are there's components that go with that solar, right? And so I would think about stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like what's supporting the EVs? You know what I mean? Like what are the things that need to, help with that? Maybe it doesn't have to be the charger itself, but what are the components that go into it? So that's where I really see like that supply chain. And those are some more of the conversations that I want to have with the GM and Ford as I work with them more on a lot of the stuff that I'm doing with the electric vehicles. So I'm kind of curious to see what they say about that.
Other questions?
Thank you for that great talk. I know you mentioned in the beginning you've maybe had some pushback with the electric vehicles and tribal communities, but have there been any positive stories on the flip side that after you've kind of implemented these charters or other sustainability measures, like what has the impacts on the community been or stories that have been told?
Oh, yeah. I should say this, too. You're always going to get your negative people in anything, right? Like, someone's always going to have something bad to say, like, this guy's, whatever. There was a bunch of people that loved this. And there was a bunch of other tribal members that were like super supportive of it. They know that the fuel costs that those programs are going to receive from these electric vehicles, that extra money is going to go back into the programs. That's going to better serve the community, right? We have a thing called energy poverty in tribal country. That's real, And so any way that I believe that we can go ahead and bring that down, I'm all for it. And through this project, that's exactly what we're doing, right? And one of the things that, understand too, okay, I was that guy that was out there protesting the Dakota Access Pipeline in Line 3, right? Like, I'm that guy, right? But I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at the law enforcement, and I just want to let all of you know, I was raised in a Minneapolis police family, okay? So, mad respect for law enforcement, okay? So just let you all know that. But I'm sitting there, and I'm protesting, and they're looking at me, and I'm thinking to myself, there's got to be an easier way to do this. And that was really where I got the concept and the idea of, like, what if we created an intertribal electric vehicle charging network connecting all the tribes? What if we opened up those old trading routes that we used to have in tribal communities, where we said to ourselves, we got good medicine here and we want to bring good medicine to other communities? You know what I mean? I felt like the government made us compete for all these grants and everything like that, and made us competition amongst each other. And I want to, like, stop that. Like, I want to be able to, like, help one another. You know what I mean? My big thing on my thing is communication, cooperation, collaboration, the 3 C's. Like, I mean, we can go far, but we can go further if we're together. You know what I mean? And so that was the whole concept behind, like, doing the intertribal electric vehicle charging network. And then I had a reporter talk to me, and he said, hey, Bob, are you doing this because people aren't flying internationally because there's a war happening in Ukraine? And I thought to myself, oh, this is a wonderful way to bring rural America along for the ride for this energy transition, right? And I thought to myself, what if this is like a Route 66? Folks are jumping in their EV vehicles, and they're driving around, and they're spending dollars in rural communities, at their hotels, at their movie theaters, whatever it may be, at the casinos. I just thought that this was a really good way to do that. And so you'll be surprised at a lot of the rural folks that called me when the story went out and asked me, Bob, can you put a charger at my business, at my place of business? That was remarkable to me. So I know I started out with a negative story there about what just happened to me, but it's been burning in my mind, and I'm like one of these people that I'm trying to please everybody. I'm trying to do everything. I'm trying to be everything to everyone, right? But I forgot about all the good things that are happening along with this, right? And all the folks that are in the community that are super supportive. So thank you for reminding me, and thank you for allowing me to say that to everyone, because that should not be missed.
We have time for one more question, and that is this, came in through the app. Do you have any advice for rural communities implementing EVs? We have some major concerns due to lack of charging infrastructure and long distances between towns. How can we help bridge that gap?
Yes, education. Educate. Learn from Bob's mistakes, okay? Bob didn't always have that education moment with his community to tell everybody, right? Now I'm on the call driving here to Wisconsin, and we have our meeting call, and the whole call is all about education. How do we do the outreach? You know what I mean? And I really think that's important, because we really got to empower our community and our community members and let them know the advantages that all this is really going to bring, and the transition and how this is all going to happen. You want to know where a lot of these data centers, a lot of these, as I'm listening to these engineers, these electric charging stations, and you know where they're going to be pinpointing commerce happening, where they're going to be pinpointing goods and services to be going to these points, right? Where they already have that, where they can pump on their little computer and say, okay, here it is, we can, So I'm thinking, everyone, that, try to make that economic argument to your community, and letting them, and explain to them that, this is really good economic-wise. It's going to create jobs and opportunities for our community. Now, for me, it's help saving the planet, man. And that's really what I'm all about. I do all this because I'm trying to save the planet, And so, I always tell folks, I might just solar panel, electric vehicle, and storage our way to give that kid who's a Tesla or Einstein enough time to figure out a solution. And that's really what ultimately I'm trying to do, is buy some time, everyone.
Thank you, Bob. Another round of applause for Bob Blake.